I'm really delighted to be joined by two great experts and business leaders who are going to talk to us about their own take on where we are on this race to zero and what are the challenges ahead for the transition to a low carbon economy. So we're joined by Rachel McEwen, Chief Sustainability Officer at SSE, and also by Peter Roebben, CEO of KBC Bank Ireland. So in order to get the conversation going, I'm going to ask Peter and Rachel in that order to give us a sense of where they feel they are in terms of the main challenges that are coming ahead for us in terms of this transition. So let me say a few words about Peter before handing over to him. So Peter has been 29 years with KBC Group, as you know, a Brussels headquartered financial services company. He has been 14 months here in Ireland as CEO of KBC Bank Ireland. And previously he held several roles with the group in the UK, Spain, France, Czech Republic and Hungary. And he has held a very important role in Belgium as Group Credit Risk General Manager, taking particular interest in some of the environmental policies. So, Peter, it's a pleasure to have you this morning, and will be great to hear from you on what you see are the key issues we're facing and how KBC Bank is responding.
Yes, Thomas. Good morning, and thank you for having me. Very interesting insights already this morning in the different by the different contributors. I think for KBC, you know, the switch to or the fight against climate change and is already part of our business model. The last 5-6 years, this has moved from something that was maybe part of CSR to really a core question for ourselves as a business. Actually, at 3 levels. First of all, there is our own commitment to reducing our own footprint and engaging with our staff and suppliers also for that. We have set ourselves very clear targets. We report on that and we get external measurement. We have an ISO 14001 certificate. We ask external specialized rating agencies actually to rate our sustainability and publish that. So we're putting ourselves under quite some pressure. And in terms of our carbon footprint since 2015, we've managed to reduce that by 50%. We thought that we would be achieving that target only by 2030. So there is an acceleration. Once you start focusing on these things as a company, you find you can do a lot more than you originally thought was possible. It's not easy looking for these solutions, but we have brought this in our way of working systematically. At another level, it has become an ever more important part of our dialogues and relationship with our customers, and that at 2 levels. On the one hand, we are keenly aware that climate change is causing transition risk, and they are real. At a very tangible level, I can say that 3% of Irish housing is prone to increased flood risk because of climate change over the next decades. We have calculated those figures back into our mortgage portfolio. We have to figure out what the risks are. KBC, by the way, is a bank insurance group, so we also carry these risks, asset risks, as an insurer. High carbon sectors, many of which are borrowers of ours in the agricultural sector and so forth, will face serious business challenges, cash flow pressure. So we have to figure out how this affects our risks. And what's happening here is, on the one hand, we are making deliberate choices to reduce our involvement in certain activities. We have almost moved entirely out of coal financing, for example, over the last couple of years. But also, and I think this is a trend that is not very broadly known in the public, Over the last couple of years, banks have really upped their efforts to start building environmental factors into the risk models. This is still in the very early stages. I was personally in KBC involved in starting that a couple of years ago, but it is rapidly accelerating, and banks are cooperating, internationally to find a taxonomy. And the recent decision of the European Commission to, the directive actually that sets out a taxonomy on how to measure climate impact will accelerate that. We are only a couple of years away, if that, before those factors start driving, capital allocation in banks and investment managers. And you will see a price differentiation. We talked about the price of carbon, it's essential, but the price of credit and the price of capital will start diverging depending on how brown or green a project or a business is scored. On the other side, of course, it also presents huge opportunities for a group like KBC in terms of helping customers to find solutions or giving them options to be part of the solution. Patilla was talking about ESG funds. I can only echo what she says. In 2015, it's only 5 years ago, ESG funds investments actually only made up 2.5% of our global assets under management. At the end of last year, it was 15%. It's rapidly accelerating. So you see a real interest of investors and retail investors also here in Ireland, because we launched a full set of ESG funds here last year. And it was quite surprising for us to see how consumers are and investors are taking up on this. Also, our lending, of course, opportunities in that field are growing all the time. Already 57% of lending to the energy sector is for renewables. So there is that side as well, how this affects our business model. So you asked, how can we have a green recovery? I would say, Thomas, how can we not?
Absolutely, Peter. Thank you very much, and that's very, very important, and it's really interesting. You're talking about the taxonomy, and I think that's a very important journey for your sector in terms of properly addressing the big risks of climate. We'll now then turn over to Rachel McEwen, and as I was saying, Rachel is the Chief Sustainability Officer in SSE. She joined the company in 2007, and obviously her role occupies responsibility for sustainability, climate change, community funds, and corporate heritage. And Rachel has a very interesting background, as she is a former chair of the leadership group of Living Wage Scotland and is currently a member of the Scottish Government's Just Transition Commission. So very interesting background. And Rachel, can we turn over to you and see how do you see climate crisis from the perspective of SSE PLC?
Thanks very much, Thomas. Just to say, I've loved listening to the contributors this morning, so I'm very grateful that you've invited me, and I want to say a big congratulations to you and PwC for the report and the debate. And I guess the timing is key. We have this unique opportunity to emerge from the awfulness of the virus and do everything better than we did it before, the way that we work, the way we do business, even the way we run our lives. So I guess as a very speedy starter for 10, I just wanted to say 3 things. To sort of kick it off and positively is to say that net or complete decarbonisation is absolutely possible, although it is true that it is quicker and easier in some sectors than in others. And in my own industry, electricity, we do know how to take all of the carbon out of our product. Electricity from renewable sources, offshore wind in particular, is now the cheapest way to generate electricity. And with a push on nailing down the technologies that should provide the balance when the wind is not blowing, and some smart policy action from governments, we should be within grasp of zero carbon electricity by the late 2030s. So with carbon increasingly being removed from electricity, electricity of course becomes a low carbon and ultimately a zero carbon energy source we can use to decarbonise the rest of the sectors, and in particular road transport and heat. Now, my second point is that while technology and the economics of transitioning to a net zero world are emerging, we must recognise the enormous social upheaval that will result. And I guess picking up on Peter's language, this upheaval results in transition risks. And as he said, Thomas, I'm on this Just Transition Commission in Scotland, and what I have been struck by, or what I'm worried about, is that the opportunities for injustice in this next decade are endless. And this debate, we sort of traditionally think about being the transfer of jobs from high emitting industries to low emitting industries, but it's much more than that. And I sort of talk about the fair distribution of what I call climate goods. So the good things associated with this: cleaner air, access to new green technology and new skills. But there's also the distribution of climate bads too, and they are effectively the costs associated with the transition. And the key point is that we, and I mean the big we, government, public sector, private sector, as a society, we must bring about the fair distribution of those goods and bads, because without that, the public legitimacy for climate action is diminished. Now, my last point is simply to say that I really believe that businesses know that they must decarbonise. I don't think that's under question. Whether they do that robustly, though, is a legitimate question. And that's why evidence, science and facts matter. It's not enough for us to become sort of a frenzy of target-tasticness to say that we want to decarbonise. We must do it and prove we've done it. So exercises like this, the Low Carbon Business Pledge, the commitments, and then the report to hold us to account are a really big part of it. And so too is the Science Based Target Initiative. So I guess, in a nutshell, at SSE, we believe that net zero by 2050 is not just desirable, it is perfectly possible, with smart policy framing and action by business and government. We must beware not to create social problems, particularly through these next few years, through these 2020s. And to avoid any notion of greenwash, companies seeking to take action should pin their plans to a credible framework from which to organise that action. Thanks, Thomas. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Rachel. That was obviously spot on, and I'm very, very happy to hear your optimism in terms of the roadmap ahead for your sector, and clearly the solutions are significant and are within our reach, and it's great to see that your company has taken that very strong position about it. So let me move then to some couple of questions, and I can see some of the questions in the chat are being echoed in some of your comments. So people have asked about the rigor of our process and just transition as well. But I would like to start with the following question, and maybe I'll ask you, Peter, first, and then Rachel, just to help us reflect. You know, obviously you have a great vision, but this vision requires you to lead a process of change within your own organizations. Can you give us a sense, or can you talk to us about how do you drive such a process of change, and how you personally feel involved in ensuring that we are progressing seriously towards net zero? Peter?
Yes, Thomas. Yes, in our case, we have embedded this deeply into our governance. So we have an internal sustainability board which has decision-making powers. It's chaired by our group CEO, and all the business unit CEOs are on that board next to a couple of experts. And that's where we drive actually and define the policies and consistently, you know, push up the targets and see how we progress. So we manage this like any other business process. It wasn't the case like that 5-6 years ago. So this just illustrates how it's become embedded. And then, of course, you do what you do in business. You try to get indeed science-based targets. That's all the time evolving. You measure your progress, you report on it, and you seek external validation. I hinted to that. So we We work with companies like Sustainalytics and others, Dow Jones, to get external ratings. And you see collaboration as well. So we are a signature to the low carbon pledge of BITC, and we have partnerships in all the countries and also at group level with similar institutions, because it's not a journey you want to undertake on your own. There is so much to learn from each other, and I think, as Rachel was saying, it's a joint effort with governments, with institutions, with other companies, and with our customers, because also organizing the dialogue with customers. I think that's something that Pelita also referred to. We should not overestimate the awareness. I do agree with Rachel. Companies by and large know. If you go to smaller SMEs, it's not always so clear. They always not so clear what to do. So also in our governance, we are trying to build in a structured way of engaging with customers about it. So very top down, I would say, in the beginning. The other part is, I think, engaging systematically with staff and suppliers. So it has to be a holistic approach. You have to basically, when you work in KBC, have the feeling that this is something we're really committed to, as committed to any other aspect of doing business.
Thank you, Peter. Rachel, how do you drive a change in a company like SSE? What role do leaders play in making this happen? Because obviously Peter was talking a lot about some of the key processes which are fundamental, and governance and transparency. But at the end of the day, it's about people, isn't it?
Absolutely. I've been doing a kind of variation of this job for about 7 years, and things have changed a lot. But kind of looking back, how that process of change came about, I wouldn't say that we started with a blank sheet of paper and we didn't take the rule book that says it needs to be led from the top and all of that. The truth is it probably was led from the top, but we didn't think of it that way. And the way I would describe it is that it was a process of evolution, not necessarily revolution. But looking back, if I look to where we were and where we are now, it has actually been a revolution, if you know what I mean, if that makes sense. Yeah. One of the big things that has changed is the shift from sustainability being considered as being something. So if you do these good things, bad things won't happen. In other words, it's like a way of managing risk. Whereas now for us, and I think for other companies too, it is seen as strategies for growth and opportunities. And I think psychologically, that's the big shift for us and for others. I suspect KBC are the same, is that this isn't just about stopping nasty things happening, a crisis with your reputation or things like that, which seems a little sort of shallow in some ways. Whereas if you make it the absolute core of your reason for being, which is, so if the purpose of business is to find profitable solutions to the problems of people and planet, then the climate challenge for an electricity company is precisely that's what we're here for. We're here to find the innovative, cost-effective, profitable solutions to find a way to run our economies without carbon, basically. Does that help?
Absolutely. Yes, no, absolutely. And that is I like to hear the word revolution in a conversation about climate change, because that's the type of change we need. And as we all know, the science behind this called for unprecedented and radical change. So that's what we need within business as well. And Rachel, if I could stay with you for a second, obviously one of the things that this low carbon pledge is trying to advocate for is further collaboration. How do you think we can bring more collaboration around this? Because at the end of the day, your company on its own cannot make this happen. How can we foster more meaningful collaboration on net zero solutions? Maybe reflecting on some of your technologies that you were describing earlier.
Okay. first of all, I think you're doing a really good job. So I actually think that you're bringing about a genuine collaboration throughout the Irish business community. I see other business communities, and I think that what you've got is very healthy. In terms of how we bring about more, our company's just gone through the Science-Based Target Initiative process, which is, I have to say, is not for the faint-hearted. It's very technical and very detailed. We have got our sort of badge of honour, but we haven't yet published in the actual detail of that. That's coming out with our financial results on the 17th of June. So I can't talk in an enormous amount of detail, but I do want to pick up on one thing, which is this Scope 3 supply chain emissions. And this is where I think collaboration is most obvious. So SSE as a company's got something like a 3 billion euro supply chain annually, and we work with some of the most impressive companies in some respects, Siemens and Mitsubishi, some really amazing companies that have got fantastic sustainability records. Now, we need, in order to have a science-based target, we need to demonstrate that that our biggest suppliers in our supply chain are also on a journey to net zero through a rigorous science-based target initiative. So one of the sort of happy consequences of seeking to be robust in achieving net zero is that you are effectively forced to do this in collaboration, because it's the neatest way of capturing your Scope 3 emissions. If everybody that you're working for is working towards net zero, so all your your suppliers are also working to net zero, then you've got this happy kind of situation of everybody working in the same direction. So I do think there are kind of happy consequences coming out of this, which are forcing collaboration if you hadn't been so inclined beforehand, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And of course, you're talking about science-based targets and your company's commitment, Rachel, to that. How do you see that aligning with governmental initiatives such as the Climate Action Plan here in Ireland and similar initiatives in Scotland and in Great Britain?
I suppose what the science-based target does is that it gives you a robust scientific evidence to which you meet the Paris Agreement. And of course, what the Climate Action Plan in Ireland is doing, and what the UK and Scottish legislation is doing, is effectively making our contributions to meeting the Paris Agreement. So it is perfectly aligned, if you know, in a way. I suppose the only thing I would say in terms of government, and governments do have an important job to do right now. You know, we've got to come out of this crisis, and we do need to create jobs, and we do need to recover. And there are things that they can do through policy framing, not necessarily fiscal interventions, but there are things that can speed up this process. So our science-based target has got targets to 2030 and 2034 and things. Could we do some of those things a little bit quicker? I think we probably could, given certain circumstances. So offshore wind's the most obvious. That the economics of offshore wind are just fantastic. None of us believed 10 years ago that this could possibly happen. And is there any reason why it's not to speed that up? The quicker we do these things, the quicker we will reach net zero. So does that help?
Absolutely, it does, and thank you very much. And I'm going to have to apologize to Peter and Pilita, because I'm looking at my clock, and there's this fantastic platform here that's telling me that everything was shut down violently in 3 minutes. So I better bring this to a close. And the first thing I want to do is apologize, because there are some really good questions here coming on, but the good thing is that we have the email addresses of everybody who asked the questions, and we will definitely follow up on that, and we'll share some with the speakers and the panelists. So can I first start by thanking very much Pilita, Peter and Rachel for sharing their insights, their knowledge, and I think they've been very solid in indicating where the opportunities are and where the challenges are. and also the need for the collaboration that we need to get to. So thank you very much to all three, and again, apologies for not making more time for this. Let me just close by saying a few things from the business and the community perspective. The first one, I don't think I need to dwell much on it. The impacts of climate change are being seen every day and continue to get worse. I know we're thinking about COVID. I know we're thinking about what the cabinet is deciding as we speak in terms of the reopening of our economy and society. But those challenges continue to exist and will continue to get more challenging. We expect that this year global CO2 emissions will be reduced by 8% because of the stall of the world economy. Yet the decade of action that we start is demanding us to reduce CO2 emissions by 7% every year between now and 2030. So the question is, how are we going to get to that radical level of emissions reduction? Second point, green recovery. I think our speakers have been extremely clear on that. Is the essential challenge and it's a great opportunity that we cannot miss. And by we, I'm talking about businesses as much as I'm talking about government and civil society. Fergal O'Rourke spoke at the very beginning about the business opportunities of this net zero low carbon economy. And again, I think both Peter and Rachel have spoken about those opportunities, and they continue to grow. And even in some of the most challenged sectors, when it comes to looking at their emissions, the opportunities are there and they are immense. And if we take on board Pilita's views around how investment is being more redirected in this way, the opportunity is there. My fourth point is business leaders must own this climate crisis as a fundamental challenge. It is something that has to be part of your business models. It has to be part of your purpose, and it has to be a key element of your own leadership. We need authentic leaders that are going to be driving this agenda, that are going to be exploiting the business opportunities, and that they're going to be driving some of the fundamental collaborations that we need. Rachel spoke about just transition, and I was reminded that we have obviously a Just Transition Commission here in Ireland too. But the recovery and the economy be built through your businesses will have to be, of course, net zero, but will also have to be fair and leave nobody behind. And that is going to be a big challenge. And for us in business and the community, we see and we definitely take on the challenge set by Kim in terms of growing the ambition and the number of signatories to the pledge, because we think this is one of the key transformational tools. We see ourselves in business and the community as the engine that will drive the action for that change. And we want to sign up more companies because we think that's the challenge.